Hi, my name's Gina.
And I'm Jen.
And this is Job Search Stories.
We're going to be giving insider secrets into how to interview well.
This is something we hear a lot from our viewers, and it can be really difficult and confusing. Speaking of viewers, we have a viewer question I would love to share with you. So this one's from David. David says, "Hey, Jen and Gina, how can you tell when an interview is going well? I feel like I interview well sometimes, but then don't hear back from them."
Well, hey, David, it happens, right?
It happens. I think we all feel like we have those little nerves, and we don't always know if it's going well.
Right. I mean, sometimes it's hard when you feel like you're giving a lot and aren't getting that same type of reception back.
Yeah. Also, some people give different energy. Not everyone is going to be super excited while they're interviewing you. So it's not always you, David. So I think we should really start with the different types of interview questions. Mm-hmm. We talk about this a lot on our channel. And I think this is something that people really appreciate from us, is really getting into the nitty gritty. What is your least favorite type of interview question and why? And I'll give mine after.
I mean, for me, any question about money just always makes me feel uncomfortable. But I did read this online the other day, and I have to admit, it made me think of you, Gina. So I read online that this person said their least favorite interview question was, "Why do you want to work for this company?" And their response is, "Because I just want the money." And that to me is a very Gina response.
I mean, okay, I have a really good response to that question though, a professional one. So no, it's not my least favorite question because I'm a great interviewee, like I always say. But yeah, no, I don't like having to do the whole song and dance. But I think the ones that trip me up the most are those behavioral type questions, because I think those ones, it's really doing the whole formula in my head, trying to remember that. My brain doesn't work like that. So,
well, there are a lot of different strategies for how to answer behavioral interview questions. So we can definitely get into that.
Yeah, I know you're going to give all the tips and tricks. I know that I'm not the only person who stumbles on behavioral type questions. And I know that you're not the only one who doesn't like talking about salary with interview questions. So let us know your interview experiences in the comments down below so that we can read them and feel less alone. So let's get into the nitty gritty. What are the different types of interview questions you could be asked during an interview?
There are a lot of different types. So I mentioned that I don't really like to answer money questions. And of course, those would be what kind of salary are you expecting? What kind of salary are you looking to make? There are also introductory questions like, tell me about yourself, where they're looking to learn a little bit more about you. You might also come across qualifier questions. This is them trying to assess your skills and qualifications. So they might ask if you have experience with particular software or, if you know how to use spreadsheets, something like that. There are also alignment questions, almost like culture fit questions, where they're trying to assess, do you align with the company or team values? And then, of course, there are behavioral questions. This is where they're looking to assess how you might perform in this role. So whenever you hear a question like, tell me about a time when, that's pretty much teeing you up for a behavioral question.
Right. Now that you've shared all those different types of interview questions, I want to know what your favorite type of interview question is.
One of my favorite types of questions are anything that's going to assess personality. And it's not necessarily to see if you're a good fit for that team. It's more to learn a little bit about you. So I was once asked, what a recent podcast I had listened to was, or what was the last book I read.
I do like those introductory questions because I feel like our viewer question, that sets you up to really, you can see if the interviewer is excited to talk to you. If you're acing that, tell me about yourself question. If you get that one down, I feel like the interviewer falls in love. It's first date questions.
Yeah, they're learning a lot about you.
Yeah.
About who you are as a professional, what you know about this company. Are you making a good fit by choosing them?
Exactly. Okay, so I kind of, I jumped the gun a little bit. You teased this a little bit, but there are some methods for answering certain interview questions. What are some of the best strategies for answering those types of questions?
So hiring managers love behavioral questions, right? Because the belief is that past experience will indicate future performance. So that's why they really want to hear how you did a certain thing in your previous role. So when you think about strategies for how you're going to answer this, first of all, you should be prepared to answer them, right? They're going to come up. Most times we recommend that job seekers prepare for at least 6 behavioral interview questions, because it may not all come in the first interview, but throughout the interview process, you're going to come across a lot of them. So when we think about certain strategies, of course, number one that you're going to hear about is the STAR method. So situation, task, action, result. But there are also variations of it. There's CAR, context, action, result, CARL, context, action, result, lesson. And then, of course, there's the WHO method, which I've talked about before, which you can use for bullet points, which is what you did, how you did it, what was the outcome. And what these strategies do is it allows you to give an example in a concise story. So not only are you sharing your experience, but you're really talking about your thought process. What actions did you take? The result, was it a good outcome? Was it a bad outcome? And in some situations, what did you learn? Because not everything always works out perfectly, right?
Yeah.
And we don't always behave perfectly, but there should be some type of personal growth that you want to highlight.
Those are some really good strategies for answering behavioral interview questions. And we also have some great videos on our channel that people can use if they need examples, because sometimes you just need to see it in action. So I feel like those are tricky interview questions, but there's also just tricky, tough situations that happen during interviews. Has there ever been a time when you've been asked a tricky interview question and you just didn't know how to answer?
So the last time I think I was really asked a tricky question was actually when I was interviewing for a role outside of the industry I had been in. And it was really interesting because it was for the same company, but the product that I was working on was sunset. And so I had to find a new job. So I was looking to transition from leading a team of career coaches to a marketing role. And so the question that I was asked in the interview was, what are 5 skills you think are needed to be a successful content marketer? And it kind of threw me for a loop in the moment. Fortunately, I'd looked at the job description, and so I knew what they were looking for. And it wasn't all that dissimilar from what I had been doing, where I was making resources for job seekers. So I really thought about those transferable skills, try to make those connections, but it was one I had not prepared for.
Yeah, but you're a career coach, so you thought on the fly. You were like, transferable skills, transferable skills.
Had to career coach myself.
Yeah, in the moment. I'm really trying to think if I've ever thought of a tricky interview question that's ever come up for me, but I think I've just either had a tricky interview and I blacked it out of my memory because it was so awful and I just wanted to forget, or there was probably a question that I was asked similar to you because I was switching industries, kind of going from editorial, journalism into marketing. Mm-hmm. And it was really just trying to highlight how the skills that I had were useful and how they could be applicable to the role that I was going for.
Making those connections, all about relevancy. You knew then, you know now.
Yeah, exactly. But what are some questions that are typically tricky for job seekers?
So just about any question can be a tricky interview question if you haven't prepared. So it's really important to even think about the most common interview questions, like tell me about yourself, or why should we hire you? Even things like give me an example of a time you made a mistake. What are your strengths and weaknesses? So if you don't prepare for those can trip you up. But there are also some other tricky questions like what's your dream job? Or what would your last boss say about you? Some that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be asked. And so when you're asked a tricky question, sometimes it's not really about the story that you give. They really want to see your thought process. So if you're asked a question and you're not really sure what they're trying to get from an answer, it's okay to ask for clarifying questions. It's okay to ask for a moment to really think about it. In an interview, those moments feel like a lifetime, but they go by so quickly. And it's better to take that pause and then get your thoughts straight than just start talking.
For sure. Also, I love that you said the trickiest questions are the ones you don't prepare for. That is so true. But then also there's ones that are legit tricky and anybody would be tripped up by then. Also, I would love if someone was like, give me a second. I need to think about this. And then they were just like, boop, and just hung up.
Have you ever asked for a second?
No.
I have.
I mean, maybe. Like, I
Yeah.
don't remember. Like, I just don't remember. But
You black out.
yeah, I black out. Okay, so there's a lot of people who really just in the moment get very tripped up. How do you answer a question when you just don't know how to answer it or you don't have experience with it at all?
Sometimes you can prepare by just doing a little bit of research. So looking at Indeed, looking at the company pages, or even looking at Glassdoor, you can see posts from people who have interviewed and will actually tell you what questions they were asked. So that gives you the opportunity to do a little bit of preparation, which is always really nice. And again, like I said, if you're asked a question where you don't have experience or you don't necessarily know what they're looking for, one, try to stay calm. You know, they could just be assessing how you would do in a high pressure situation. And an interview really is a high pressure situation. You know, sometimes work is a high pressure situation. So if that's, you know, part of the job, they might just want to see how you react. And again, you can ask for those clarifying questions, but just think about expressing as much as you can. And if you feel like you rambled, you can always ask, did that answer your question? Or is there any more information that I could give that would help?
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, do your research. Also, stay calm, cool, collected. And you touched on a good point because I do this all the time, just in regular life.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do if you're answering an interview question and you're just rambling on, or it's just really awkward and you don't know if you're doing a good job answering the question?
Sometimes you just got to wrap it up, right? When you think about how long an interview answer should be, 2 minutes is the max, right? So if you feel like I've been talking for a long time, that's when you can really stop and ask that clarifying question of, did that answer your question? And just know that if you even notice that the question revealed a gap in your knowledge or experience, it's okay to express that you're willing to learn. And I actually get asked this question all the time, which is, okay, I didn't have a good answer in the interview, but as soon as I left, I was able to think about it and I came up with a really great answer. How do I answer that question now? The thank you email. Great opportunity too. You should absolutely be sending a thank you email within 24 hours after your interview. And that's a really good opportunity for you to recall that question and just elaborate a little bit more and share those thoughts that you have now.
Or if you're like me and you blacked out during the entire interview, the thank you email will suffice because you're not going to remember any of those questions that they asked. But if you're not like me, those tips are marvelous.
All right, Gina, you know I love a game. So we're going to play a little game right now. We're just going to call it red flag, green flag. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call out some examples of what could be considered a sign that the interview is going well, and which will show the green flag, or if the interview is not going well, and then you'll give me a red flag. All right?
That's easy.
Should be. I think it'll be fun.
Okay. I know the rules.
The interview was shorter than expected.
Okay.
What? Why would it be green if it's shorter than expected?
Maybe they just really liked you from jump and they're like hired.
They're like, you were so concise. We learned everything we needed to know about you in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. If the interview was to go longer than expected, that would actually be a green flag.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
If it's shorter than expected, that would be a red flag. So that could be an indication that with the answers that you have been giving, they aren't necessarily hearing what they're looking for. All right, next one. You aren't having a conversation or the interviewer doesn't seem engaged with you. All right, now we're on board. We're thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
If you feel like you're in a one-way conversation where the hiring manager is asking you questions and you're giving answers, but it doesn't really feel like a conversation, that could be the sign of a red flag. The interview may not be going very well. And we always have to remember that an interview should be a two-way exchange. You're trying to assess if they're a good company for you just as much as they're trying to assess if you're a good candidate for them.
I love that. They should be chatting with you and having a good little convo.
All right.
Give me the next one.
Next one. They take you on a tour of the building.
Okay. It's a little soft one, you know?
Soft.
Okay. Yay, they want you to move in.
Wouldn't it be funny if they were just showing you the exit?
They're like, get out. There's the door. Kick.
So generally, if they're showing you around and they're introducing you to the team or showing you where the person hired would work, that could be a good sign. It gives them the opportunity to kind of introduce you to your potential teammates. They get to assess you and see who might be working with them. So a little bit of a tour could always be a green flag.
Okay, yeah. They're like, welcome to your new home.
Hope you like it here.
It's great. Here's the cafeteria. This is where you eat your food.
Then the last one.
Last one. Okay, I got this.
You're asked about your availability.
Okay. I know this.
That's right. If there's any conversation about next steps, that's always a positive sign and a green flag that the interview is going well. They could be trying to assess your potential start date or even trying to line up a next round interview. But any talks about the future are always good conversations to have.
These tips are amazing because it's really good to be able to identify these red flags and these green flags while you're interviewing, because it also gives you an opportunity maybe to pivot while you're interviewing. Maybe you can redirect the conversation. Just gives you an opportunity to shine a little bit more if you are sensing some of these red flags during the interview process. Do you think it's ever okay to walk out of an interview?
I don't think it's okay to just get up and leave, but I do think it's okay to end an interview early. It's something that I've done before. Okay. I mean, like I said, it's a two-way conversation, right? So if you assess that the role is not right for you, you can be respectful of their time as well.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to sit through a whole hour-long or 30-minute interview if you already know, like, okay, this isn't the type of work that I'm looking for. You can still thank them for their time, but let them know you're really looking for something else. You don't want to burn a bridge, but it's okay to say, you know, I don't think this is the right role for me at this time, but I appreciate everything you've been able to share with me. And it sounds like you've got a really great opportunity here.
Another reason would be if you walk in and the interviewer is your ex.
What?
I'd be like, no, not doing it. You're trying to crawl back into my life. Bye, sir. Anyways. Well, I think you gave some great tips in this episode, but to wrap it all up in 60 seconds or less, how can you tell if an interview went well?
You can tell an interview went well if you're getting some positive responses from your answers. If you're seeing a lot of head nods or smiles, it seems like they're picking up what you're putting down. If they're asking you about the future, when's your availability? When would you be able to start? These are all really good indicators. If they're taking you around to meet other people in the team or introducing you to a lot of people, if they start talking about additional perks, team outings, what they like to do, they like to go to happy hours, where they're going to be next week, that's a good indicator that the interview is going well.
Beautiful. And I feel like you gave some really good tips just about how interviews can be a little scary, but like they don't have to be nerve-wracking and you can really prepare ahead of time. That's all we have for today. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Job Search Stories, and it will definitely be a green flag if you subscribe to our channel and leave any comments for any other content you want us to make for you all. Bye. Bye. Behavioral, what are they called? Toot toot. Beep beep. I'm just brain malfunction. Because they were like, you're trash.
Your answer's garbage.
You're garbage.
The interviewer, are you playing with your flags?